I'd like to hand over to Pierre, if you would, to make a start for the day for us on karakia, notices and apologies.
I'll do the karakia, probably not the notices of apologies. Koe anō tēnā tātai. Ko waira ka rea tau kei runga ki tēnei te huhuinga tangata. Tēnei tū nei ki te mihi ki a koera e pita hoki wairu ama. Tēnā he tū tēnei ki te mihi ki te tātou nei i rā mutu a Joella hoki wairua mai rā kōrua. Anei rā tētahi wā ki a mihi ki a rāua kua mene atu ki te pō e takahia i tērā te ara whānui e kore hoki mai. Ka ngaro nei ki a tātou e hui i te rangi nei. Many of us are still learning te reo. I'm acknowledging the passing of Peter Paku and of Joella Brown. Nō reira kōruara. Haere ki ta tahara i a rātau, puta anō kei roto ki tēnei, te matawa Māui, haere atura. Anei rā ngā mahu e tangata, kia hāpai, kia pikau hea e ngā mahi kāre anō e tukia. Nō reira kōruara, haere. Anei rā ngā mahu e tanga. Ka mihi kātangi. Nō reira kātiake rā koutou kia koutou, hoki mai rā kia tātou. E aku nei rangatira, tēnā tātou e pūhia nei te hau ua hea nei te ua e whitia nei te rangi. Ko tā aku e tūnei kia huakina i ta tatau o tēnei komiti a kaunihera, ki te mihi ke etahi o ngā kanohi hau katahi katai. Huri mai rā ki o koutou, here taunga tamatea, te mihi kia kōruara, nau mai haere mai. Tēnā koe Laura, tēnā koe Keri. Nau mai haere mai kei wanganui ki tēnei me ki rā ngā rangatira. Tā tēnā pito. Te mihi atu. Tēnei te mihi ki a koe rā, pāhauera. Teresa. Hei, te paki katau nei. Haria mai rā koutou pukenga. Tō koutou mātauranga. Kia tāpiri mai kei runga i ngā kaupapa hohonu, ngā kaupapa whānui, ngā kaupapa taitai, kei roto ki tēnei komiti kaunihera. Te mihi atu. Aka huri mai ki tēnā me ki rā ta kai, te taurapa pēo ta waka. E api. Tēnei te mihi ki a koe rā nā i au nei rangatira i whiriwhiri a kō wai rā hai tiamana mō ngā ngai tā ua nei. Nā unei ta tangata i whiriwhiri ai a rāta. Nō reira ka mana hia i tēnā a tātou e ta wairo i tāu nei nohoanga kei runga ki tēnei te tūranga nei. Ka mihi. Hoki mai rā ki tēnei, e alana, tā kōrua nei. Kia awhi ke manaaki mai ngā kaupapa kei muara i tēnei komiti. Nō reira, te mihi kia kōrua. Nō reira, noho tautoko mai me ki rā a Rick, a Will, kei roto ki tēnei kaunihera i a tata. Nō reira, kātira ke hoki mai ki tētahi o ngā karakia, he wahanga mā koutou, he wahanga mōku. Ue ngana ki te pitu tarangi atu honei, he ngana tā ue naku i ue rangi. Tūrea ta kawarera ta hau tonga ta haramaira. Toki nui ta toki ro, ta toki tā wai. Ka panaturu e taku pō i tarangi ka hinga ka mate, wakataka te hau ki te uru, wakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kiu te kia mā tara ki tai. E hia ke ana te atakura. He teo, he huka, he hauhu, tihei mauri ora. It's on your hands, team. Kia
whakatikanga ake ki rungara, ka titi whapere hutai, pe ara I whanatu aira, o te kura ki au, hei tohu no ake, ki te kura I te rehutai, te whakawhiti o te ra, te whakaai o whenua, hoki muri mai au ki te iwi, he ara I whanatu aira.
Downloadable from the Apple Store or from Google. Aye. So next time we'll have more volume. Engari ko tā koe mihi rā kia tātou kāpiti hono tātai hono rātou kua mihi a kua tangihia. Tātou te honga ora, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, uri no tēnā tātou. Pass back to you for notices and apologies, Chair.
Thank you, Peri, for starting us off in the manner you do, with the dignity and the style. So I've now got two minor things. Notices. I understand, no notices for the meeting, and to ask if there are any apologies. Any apologies? No apologies being noted. So I now want to hand over to Apiata for must recognise. Who was that? The wall. The wall. Who was speaking on the wall? So I thought I would firstly acknowledge you as our new co-chair, and I know there's a saying in Māori about the old net and the new net. I'm not going to use that because I think Liz is still very new and lots of fishing left to Liz, and I just think it's going to be a style change, and I welcome it and look forward to working with you as a co-chair over the coming year. And I want to publicly thank Liz for all of her outstanding work. She provided cultural advice, she provided legal advice, she provided good wisdom, and she was a very powerful contributor to this organisation in every form. Her opinion was valued on every occasion, and I wish her well with a new job. I think her new employer will be very happy with her services over the long term. I look forward to seeing Mana Haru thrive. Apiata, yeah.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and for your acknowledgement of Liz, but also for your warm welcome. I'll take the opportunity to acknowledge Pierre's comments and the noted absence of some of our members and the new faces which have been brought to the table. Both Peter and Joella's departure into a different space has opened up opportunities for others to grow in this space. And so acknowledging their passing, but also still note their ahua and their presence here with us even today, and their input into our new members and their guidance to our new members who have come to the table. And so old net, new net, where some rākau have fallen, a tōtara or two have fallen amongst the forest of those of us who care for the kaitiaki of our environment. And so that's allowed sun to come through and encourage new growth. And so to our new members, really looking forward to how we will shape and form the relationships that we build here at the table with Council, how we look to the intense work ahead of us, and how we might be able to form stronger, more comprehensive strategies to address some of the challenges the environment has laid for us, and mostly the challenges that central government has put in front of us all around meeting milestones and pathways, etc. So, nō reira, ka nui te mihi atu ki koutou o ngā kānohi hau I tēnei rā. And I might just take this opportunity with the extension of the chair to allow the new members to introduce themselves, if that's all right.
That's your prerogative now. You're the co-chair, so I'm just following here. Why you?
Ngā mihi Teresa, will go with my left and move our way around. Kia ora.
Kia ora, ko Tawhirirangi te manga, ko Mohaka te awa, ko Mohaka rawa ko te hoki ngā marae, ko Ngāti Pāhauira te iwi. I live in a little place called Rauponga, and along with Charlie. We both live there, so we're quite active in our community with everything, including the water, which is a big topic for us at the moment. But we're working on it and hope to get a good solution for that. Also quite active in our tile space. Yeah, kia ora.
Kiri, I'd invite you to introduce yourself.
Kia ora koutou, ko Kiri Ropiha tōku ingoa. Ko te awa pūtahi tōku maunga, ko te aure kaitai tōku awa, ko rongo marae roa tōku marae, ko Ngāti Kiri tōku hapu. I'm really grateful to be here and start on a journey in this mahi for people of Tamatea. Yeah, I look forward to the journey from here. Kia ora.
Alana, you want to pass forward?
Aye, because I've been welcomed and introduced.
Ngā mihi. Laura.
Well, awa, kia ora koutou katoa, ko Laura Kelly tōku ingoa, no Herataunga hau. Ko kahurana ki te maunga, ko Naruroro te awa, ko Ngāti Poporo te hapu, ko Nai te whātui apati te iwi, ko Korongatā te marae. So, first official meeting here. I was just saying to my colleague over there, it feels like we've been a part of this fabric of the building for the past month, because this is our third visit. Lived here most of my life and I've never visited this place, so kia ora. Thank you for your warm welcome there, Chair, and to the other fellow councillors, kia ora. So Kiri and I, we're from Herataunga Tamatea Settlement Trust, and I have replaced Peter Paku, moi mai rā e koro, and Kerry's here replacing Liz Munro. So thank you for acknowledging our colleagues near and dear to us, and we wish you well with Mana Ahuriri Trust. So we're here, we represent 66 hapu and 23 marae. So big job, and Pakihiwi ki te pakihiwi, eh, mate? So, kia ora koutou katoa, lovely to meet you all.
Well, that's lovely. Thank you. We now come on to the next item on the agenda is conflict of interest declarations. We've got a conflict of interest they'd like to declare.
Chair, I don't have a conflict, but as a resource management practitioner, I have had some involvement in the marine and coastal area Takatai Moana proceedings that are in the Statutory Advocacy schedule, along with the application for the water conservation order. I'm just tabling that.
You're not going to be a decision-making?
No, that's not a decision-making item.
Sure. All right. No conflicts noted. We come on to confirmation of the minutes. The minutes have been circulated. I'm sure you've all read them and can memorise them. Is there any errors or omissions, or should we just simply, would you like to move the minutes?
Happy to move the minutes.
Vote seconder.
Happy second.
Thank you. All right, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary no, carried. Follow-ups. Who's going to lead us on the follow-ups? Is this going to be you, Chief Executive? Follow-ups?
So the third follow-up there, sorry, kia ora. So this has been a rather long gestation. One of the requirements in here is that it is the appointors and not the appointees that need to approve the terms of reference. We've approached the appointors, which will be the chairs, the respective bodies for each of the PSGEs, and we've only had responses back from 2. So I guess we're going to tackle this again, but would beseech you, as being the appointees into the Regional Planning Committee, to assist us to get the terms of reference approved by your respective post-settlement governance entity heads and chairs. So that's the approach that we'll take this time. It's been sitting on our books now for about a year, Chair, but that's the approach. With the assistance and support of our PSGE appointees, we should be able to get this across the line hopefully soon.
Okay. All right. Is there any other matters that people would like to raise amongst the follow-ups?
Not amongst the follow-ups, Mr Chair, but just noting that we've received some messages from our online participants, particularly Tanya Hopmans. She's addressing her technical issues, but may lose connection temporarily at the beginning, but she will join us again.
Okay. Welcome, Tanya. All right. Will someone move that the follow-up be received? Move. Martin. Second, Will. All those in favour say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Call for minor items not on the agenda. Do any people have minor items not on the agenda? Anybody on the wall have minor items not on the agenda? No? Well, we'll pass that. We move on to the Tangata Whenua Hearings Committee Panel Commissioners Conflict of Interest Management.
Thank you, Chair. Just I'll introduce the paper briefly before taking any questions. So this paper originated from the Hearings Committee themselves, a desire to get greater local participation of tangata whenua representation on hearings panels. And clarifying and seeking some clarification on when a conflict of interest exists or not, particularly where that consent application is in the rohe of somebody who wishes to sit on the hearing panel. So we have provided or sought some advice from Simpson Grayson on that, and the Hearings Committee has asked that this paper be circulated through both the Māori Committee and RPC before coming back to the Hearings Committee. The paper circulated through the Māori Committee 2 weeks ago, I believe.
Thank you. If I might make a couple of other introductions about this. When I came onto this regional council, I went and did the course on making good decisions. Having been on the course, I have yet to be assigned to a hearings panel. That's just the way that things worked. And so we have by my own experience, and I guess others, we have a lack of experience in hearings panel commissioners at the local level. But more importantly, we have relied on cultural advice generally from people out of the region. We have not used our local people as much as we could have or should have. Part of the problem for that is that people haven't, firstly, we've had some issues about getting people through the course, but more importantly, it's about giving people opportunity to be on the hearings panel, to gain experience and thereby grow and develop their skills. One of the perceived barriers to this in the past has been the issue of a conflict of interest. And when this issue was discussed at the Hearings Committee, people asked questions, well, what does a conflict of interest mean in terms of Māori, in terms of cultural advice? So if the matter comes up and it affects kahununu, if someone is a kahununu by descent, does this mean that they automatically have a conflict of interest? So this paper is set out to be a way of making sure that the conflict of interest is understood. That just being connected to kahununu is not in itself a conflict of interest and does not disqualify people. So this paper is, in a way, is to make clarity about potential conflicts of interest in this area, to ensure that it makes it more the pathway for people to get promoted or get put onto hearings commission is managed better. So the paper really says that you have to have a pretty close association with it, so it's not something that can be generally applied to. So a conflict of interest would be that if someone was a trustee of a trust, a Māori trust, which is making submissions on the matter and therefore directly connected, or writing submissions in their own account. And so the paper narrows it down quite significantly, making it more able for us to steer past and promote people, put people on committees so they have hearings and are able to participate. So it's to be a helpful paper. in this regard, I think it's quite good. So it's here as advice. Okay, any questions or things people would like to raise about this? One, you're close to this, you were the chair of the hearings committee.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Look, I think the paper's a helpful starting point in terms of a framework for ensuring that we can be as inclusive as possible in terms of mana whenua involvement in hearings panels in particular, as opposed to tangata whenua. And what it enables us to work through is just testing each case as it comes before, or each application as it comes before us, through some practical questions like, what was the potential panellist directly involved in preparing the submission, or are they, would it significantly affect them in some direct way that's distinct within the hapu or the iwi, as it might be. And it will be a benefit, because I think it will mean that we can safely, without risk of challenge, be more inclusive than otherwise. It is necessarily, however, a paper prepared, at least with reference to the Simpson-Grierson advice, through a sort of, if I can call it tikanga Pākehā, or a common law lens rather than tikanga Māori. And so I think the benefit of bringing it to this tepu is that any tikanga dimensions that are not resembled or reflected in the advice could be shared here. But to give you an illustration of what I mean by that, if Royal Forest and Bird or Fish and Game or Environmental Defence Society made a submission on one of the applications that comes before this council, which is very common, the fact that I'm a member of one of those organisations but had absolutely nothing to do with it, I just give them $20 a month or something, wouldn't disqualify me. I mean, we're all members of things like that. That's the kind of people we are. We wouldn't be here. So it's where you sort of go to that next level of direct engagement or being directly affected. If it was literally dealing with something on your back door that involved land that you own or that was going to benefit or be affected adversely by the proposal, then for you to sit as in effect judge on your own cause would just not work. So I think that's the advice is reasonably helpful, and it's what I was hoping to see for the reasons I've shared, but where we could benefit now is from that additional layer of tikanga, which is now part, officially, according to the courts, of our legal system, and rightly so. So that's what I wanted to share.
All right. Anybody else? Up here.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Absolutely endorse and support the comments from both the Chair and Councillor Williams as Chair of the Hearings Committee. Those were all positive outcomes that we are also looking for as tangata whenua reps. When we read through the paper, there were a number of items which we thought would benefit significantly from stronger tangata whenua input. So rather than highlight those and try and design it by committee, we'll look for an opportunity as tangata whenua members to work closely with staff in this next phase of the draft, so that we can bolster the terminology used, avoid any potential conflict or offence, but also address those lanes that we want to be clear about who sits in this lane and who sits in that lane around such things as determining conflicts of interest or affiliations with either a kaupapa or an iwi group. And so we collectively identified a number of opportunities in the paper that would do with some strengthening, and so as a group we were keen to participate with staff in the next edition of the draft so that we can tighten that down. And the only question I had as a result of our tangata whenua meeting was directed to staff around what opportunity did the Māori Partnerships team have in the formation of the paper, the draft, as it currently lies.
Through you, Chair, staff worked alongside the Māori Partnerships team to put the paper together.
Cool. Wonderful. Then we welcome that opportunity to strengthen the work that's already been done. But we also acknowledge that we have talked many times here at the table about the tsunami of work that is coming and the assumed relationship that we as a council have with mana whenua and tangata whenua across Te Mātou and Māui. There is a lot of assumption in the Crown's assessment of our relationship, and we put a lot of weight in the good faith that we've expressed here at this table. And so our focus is to build, hopefully, a good framework that provides the mitigation of risks that we need as officers of the organisation, but also provides confidence from a mana whenua perspective that we are putting the best people forward to make the best representation for the environment while addressing those conflicts of interest, be they perceived or be they real. So those are my comments from our tangata whenua members, as well as the question to staff. Ngā mihi.
Thank you, Apiata. I also would add to that I think it would be a good place to have that discussion would be at the next hearings committee meeting, because that is the governors for this, and they are more in charge of the rules than the staff, and it's them that have to manage the thing. And so I guess that you should liaise primarily with Martin as our leader on the hearings committee, and I'm sure that we'll come to a formulation of words that you'll be very happy with.
Thank you.
Anyway.
Kia ora, co-chairs, tēnā koutou katoa. I'm really encouraged to see, I think, staff, the parts around point 11, where it really does highlight where a person is a member of iwi or hapu or can whakapapa to parties involved in the hearing process. This alone will not necessarily raise conflict of interest. So I'm really encouraged by that note. And that guidance, as it does clarify and help us guide more participation by mana whenua, tangata whenua on these hearing panels. So given that, we have a list of current RMA Making Good Decisions panellists. Can we get some advice on possibly the next training session, because there's some that are going to have to renew? And then obviously we have new membership that may want to participate in the next course. So maybe for a follow-up, just an indication when those courses can be run again for follow-ups. And then obviously putting the pānui out for those who are interested.
Ka pai.
Awesome. Sorry, one other thing, co-chairs. Just a follow-up. Just a question to the chair of our hearings committee, Councillor Williams. So, or possibly staff as well, what are our next steps if we're to resolve and pass these recommendations? What will we see happen next, and sort of a bit of a time frame around that?
Was that a question to me?
Well, either of you, but probably Katrina. Yep.
Fire away, Katrina.
Through you, Chair, I'm happy to work with whoever wants to work with me on that to make changes to the report and the framework as RP was suggesting, and then take that to the hearings committee for further discussion and adoption if that's appropriate.
Thank you.
Do you want to add to that?
Well, I just wanted to note that I've asked Katrina if we could have presented to the hearings committee, the next meeting's on 2 March, a schedule or landscape of what's ahead of us, because we've got the Ravensdown application, there's tranche 2, there is all of the renewals within the Heretanga catchment, there are all of the tuki consents, and there could be a couple of hundred of those. So there's possibly about 1,000 resource consents coming through the council over the next 12 months. And just to get a sense of, forewarned is forearmed, co-chair, what I think you were saying. Get a sense of what is in front of us so that we can actually think of that in this context as well as just for sheer workload reasons, make sure we're resourced. We've been through these discussions and thought processes prior, and we're not caught flat-footed. But I certainly welcome kōrero around this ahead of the committee meeting on 2 March. The more definitive the advice could be ahead of that meeting, the better. Otherwise, we can set some time, because I think that's what the meeting's actually about, is this particular kaupapa. So that's what I just wanted to add. Thank you very much.
2nd of March.
Yeah.
Yes,
Just like to
Charles.
sort of a question from Simpson Greer's letter. Simpson and Grierson's letter, paragraph 13, about clarifying the Council's approach to conflicts of interest in other documents, such as relationship agreements with the iwi authorities. Do we not have a list of those and what they're about?
So look, 13, clarify the council approach to conflict.
We must have some agreements with Ngāti Kahungunu Incorporated, with Pāhauwera and the gravel, those sorts of agreements.
Well, okay. Well, I'd ask for, I'd ask the clarify. I can't see the answer to that immediately, unless Katrina has, because I don't know that we have. I was puzzled with that. I didn't know that we had agreements with other entities which required a clarification of this. It certainly puzzled me. But I'll ask Katrina and Perry if they've got any idea of that. And if there is, I think the best place for that report to go is to the Hearings Committee, because they are the ones who make the decision about the appointments. Katrina, Perry?
Kia ora, through the chair. It's a good question. Do I have the list in hand in terms of the current relationship agreements that are held between council and iwi authorities or tangata whenua rōpū? I don't have that list in hand, but usually the conflicts of interest is handled as a matter of course in the meetings and the assembly of those MOUs. Now that promises to be a growing list as our business continues on with respective entities. So I don't have a list. There are some that we do have MOUs and relationship agreements with that will continue to grow as tangata whenua and mana whenua become a stronger part of our business.
And if I could add to that, if I'm sorry to hog the time, if I could add to that, the responsibility for managing a conflict of interest rests with the individual themselves. This is not a matter for the council, the entity, and there has been a bit of murkiness as to what actually represents a conflict of interest. This legal advice is set to try and help clarify that and make it clearer for individuals in themselves in making decisions about whether or not they have a conflict of interest. But as importantly, it also helps clarify for those sitting around the table whether they perceive that there's a conflict of interest or not. And the point that was noted there by Henuai in the letter is exactly part of that. It's a clarification. So the people participating in the process are aware of it and can therefore, not have the anxiety that some have had in the past. We've seen a bit of that. So, but anyway, we'll get advice on that. If people have got a better advice on that. I understand Tanya's got a hand up. Tanya, to the wall.
Te Māori, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
I think that's all good discussion. And I think it's good to discuss conflicts of interest from a governance training perspective as well, and to recognise that pretty much all these questions that are being applied to tangata whenua or Māori also apply to pretty much any commissioner who might be chosen for a hearings panel. So I think it's good to note that. The second thing is it would have been helpful, and maybe this could be a reminder, it's great that the Māori Partnerships team has been involved in the preparation of this paper, but it would be really good to make sure that papers are run by or developed, at an early stage with Ricky's input as well, Ricky Ellison, because I think it just helps enrich the paper and make sure that his expertise and his experience gets reflected in that. So we had a really good chat and discussion about the paper at our tangata whenua hui a week or so ago, and lots of points were brought up, which is why Api has mentioned working with whoever, if it's the hearings committee, in terms of producing a revised framework and criteria, if you like. So I think in the future, I'd just like to reiterate, it's been said before, it would be great to have papers that they're, when they're being drafted, discussed with Ricky, so at least he can highlight what he can see are likely to be issues or helpful matters to be covered.
Thank you.
Kia ora, Chair. The point is taken. Tēnei te mihi kia koe Tania. So conflicts of interest, yes. Māori Partnerships team will continue to work with Katrina's team, really picking up what is the nub of this discussion and issue, and that is how do we grow the capacity in regards to our hearing commissioners from tangata whenua. So we'll work closely with Katrina's team and come back, particularly around the points you've raised, Councillor Ormsby. Tēnā tātou.
Councillor Van Dijk.
Yeah, good morning, especially to you, Api. Look forward to working with you as the new co-chair. It'll be interesting to see what your style is going to be like, rather than sitting there on your desk on the wall. We actually will see you here in person, which is really great. So that's really good. Just a general knowledge question, and that's really about conflict of interest. And if a commission has been chosen and actually then acts in conflict, who is the authority that actually will actually preside over that, and who are the parties that actually can raise that? Just general knowledge. Maybe Marta can shed some light on it, just in case we have these issues occurring.
Who's the police, if you like?
I wasn't going to use that word.
It's a self-disclosure obligation, essentially. That's where the conflict lies with the person in that position and the responsibility to resolve it. I think Rick's a bit of an authority on this as well. But the first rule of conflict management is disclosure.
Yep,
and once people know what it is, then we can work out how to manage it and whether it can be managed. They're the two important questions. So there isn't a, well, I guess you'd be subject to Auditor General or Ombudsman or that type of jurisdiction. It's not something the Environment Court would get too worried about. But yeah, really it's up to local authorities to police this themselves. You could potentially get judicially reviewed in the High Court if you carried on, or something. There's all sorts of theoretical possibilities there, but we need to own this and deal with it.
Because if a hearing is in process,
yeah,
and there is perceived by the parties, whichever party, that there actually is a conflict being exercised,
yes.
That's really what the
training is. I mean, I had my first hearing on the Wairoa discharge. I had my capacity to sit on that hearing challenged. It was the very first thing that happened in the hearing. And so we went outside as a panel and had a chat about that, and we actually heard from all of the people in the room that wanted to speak as to whether I should proceed. That's another thing you can do. So at the time that because these things can surface during the hearing. Someone could walk into the room and you go, oh crikey, they're part of that submitter, that's my aunt. You know what I mean? Or, oh jeepers, it's a relationship is suddenly revealed to you. You normally get pre-warning, like you know who the submitters are, you know who the applicant is, you know what awa it is, you know what piece of land it is. But sometimes you get taken by surprise. A witness will turn up and you go, that witness over there, that's my sister-in-law. That can happen, or a challenge can be made to you on the day, and you are trained around the processes of managing that. But the more open you are about that process, the more inclusive you hear from people, you make a judgment, there's guidelines and frameworks about the seriousness of the conflict, what actions you could take. Ultimately, you could just decide as a panel, I'm out of here. It could mean the hearing collapses, but that's fairly dramatic. So if you give good reasons and people are aware of the conflict, and the main thing is that you retain an open mind. That is really the main thing, because we're such a small nation, and particularly I guess with mana whenua relationships, everyone's so connected through whakapapa. That if we were too purist about this, there wouldn't be a hearings panel on the land. So I think it's just about being open about that and revealing a capacity to retain an open mind. If you can't, get out.
If I could add to that, the key point of managing this is the hearings committee in making an appointment. So that at the time that it comes up, then people who are potential commissioners declare who they are openly, then people can see, and the decision is then made on open knowledge about who is going to be best managing it. The tension here is that we want people who have local knowledge to be on the panel so they are informed. But the closer you get, the nearer you get to the conflict. And the purpose of this paper is to set out clearly what the law is, not just what we thought it was, the law in terms of what the Office of the Auditor General, who's written extensively on this, and court decisions are, to say, well, these are the lines. So that when the committee is making its decision, people have declared openly who they are. The committee can then make a decision, we appoint X so-and-so, because we believe there is no conflict of interest, that they will have an open mind, even though they are close to this, that they will represent the commission, make a fair hearings commissioner. And so if there is a challenge, then the chair, this is my view of it, the chair of the hearings committee, Martin, can say, well, we as the regional council appointed the person, we were aware of this and aware of that, but these are the factors we took into consideration, and we support the person being there to be defensive, because it's very easy to throw the accusation that someone has a conflict of interest. It's a way of ankle tapping, tripping them up, undermining the decision, and we have to be in a position where we can defend people. So this is not only opening a door to get more people in, it's also, in my view, to be a defensive mechanism. So we made this decision, these are things we consider, we support the person. But you're going to have to balance this, having people close to it, by people and remoteness. So the closer we want our people to be on these committees, because they have, therefore, local knowledge, the closer you get to the issue of a conflict of interest. So we have to have some clarity in our thinking when we're making the judgment. Is that helpful?
You go on a different area completely than I was actually asking, but that's okay, because you're defending the paper, and I'm not actually speaking against the paper. I'm actually in favour of the paper. What I'm actually saying, because this paper actually develops a network that we actually have got a barrier on top of the cliff, rather than actually trying to put an ambulance on the bottom when we actually have to intervene when a commissioner actually acts in conflict, okay? So we've selected councillors, commissioners, and they've declared their conflict, but then during a process, they may act conflicted.
Oh, I see.
Ah, is that what you...
Actually revealing some behaviour during the hearing? Or...
Absolutely. That's my question. And who then is because we need to have confidence in the whole process.
Neither of us quite clocked that.
Exactly.
Well,
that now.
Yeah, okay. Well, if I could respond to that, Chairs, your training, again, as a hearings commissioner, is to ensure that your capacity to retain an open mind is consistent with your behaviours. If you are climbing into the witnesses for the applicant, cross-examining them, doing this sort of stuff. You
do it all the time, Martin. No, just kidding.
Only when you're speaking. Sheriff, only when you're speaking.
Exactly. That's right. I'll pick up on it.
You need to be the model of impartiality, not only in reality, but in the way that you are perceived and come across. Other than that, I'm not sure, I've never seen that happen through the course of a hearing where someone in the way they have behaved has caused a conflict. Look, I'm sorry, Commissioner, the way you've been carrying on for the last 2 days, you're clearly biased. I've never seen it happen, but in theory it could. A submitter would pop up, or the applicant would pop up and say, look, this isn't working, I want the hearing adjourned, I want you to stand aside and here's my reasons. Okay. So if that's the answer to your question. Can I just make this other further point? And I prevail upon the members of this panel and our advisors for the reason that Councillor Barker's just shared. We are going to be appointing a replacement for the Clive River dredging, the Ravensdown and the Tuki Tranche 2 consent application hearing. So if we are going to be defending the appointments and be totally conscious and aware of the landscape by 2 March, we need to know how that looks. So the more thought that can be given in those specific contexts before too much, as well as the general principle, the better. Thank you.
All right, I think we've had a good discussion. Any other points? Okay, would someone care to move the paper be received? Councillor Foss. Councillor Taylor. All those in favour say aye.
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 No, carried. Right, proposed schedule of meetings. Who would like to speak to this? I want to just firstly acknowledge that James has had to absent himself from the meeting. He's got another more pressing engagement on.
More pressing?
Sorry?
More pressing?
More pressing,
What's
yes.
more pressing up and see?
Didn't he see the schedule of meeting?
I think that's why he might have fled the meeting. He saw the schedule of meetings. All right, who's going to lead us with this? Kelly, you're going to lead us with this, the schedule of meetings?
I could step in and lead on behalf of our governance team. So the schedule proposed has been part of the meeting pack and on your Stella applications. And we're really just bringing that into your audience so you can consider this as prospective dates moving forward over the course of 2022, Chair. So it's very much for your information, but more importantly, for scheduling within your respective diaries.
The other point I'd add to that, you'll see in the list of schedules is all governance days. This is different from what we've had in the past. We've had separate MARTA committee and separate RPC meetings. And given the last two meetings we've had with the councillors, RPC and the MARTA committee have met together and been very useful and helpful, we've scheduled some of those meetings to make sure we're all joined up. So that's the purpose of them. We want to stay joined up. All right.
Chair, just a question on that. The 22nd of June, which
your
is
birthday,
in lowercase all governors who are your because it's not highlighted as the other. Is that just a holding pattern there, or is that just a typo?
I think someone's got a warning for that.
Oh.
Service standard failure.
You've dealt with them, have you? In the way
No, I stated that. I think it's just a...
Is it already in written form now?
I think that's just someone hasn't put it in caps or bold, that's all that is.
Okay, all right, thanks.
It might be a lowercase day for you and I,
Oh,
rather than uppercase day.
certainly not for me.
Okay, any other... Well spotted though.
Perhaps just... Chair, just to add to that, I apologise, but we are moving towards the 23rd of March, which is when we're hoping that all of the governors will reconvene. And between our last meeting in December and to that date there, we're well aware that the Māori Committee has met in their own session to discuss this. And perhaps it might come up as part of today's discussion in terms of hearing back from the Regional Planning Committee, Tangata Whenua.
Yes, thank you. All right, would someone move the planning schedule? Councillor Niwai and Apiara. Councillor Ormsby. Right, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
I do know, carried. Policy project updates. Another gripping item. Who's going to lead this? Katrina, is this more your line? Kerry? There's some pretty meaty subjects in here, by the way. Oof.
Test my balance. So ordinarily we do just take these papers as read, but given that we have a lot of new members today, perhaps if I just step you through the paper. Do you mind if I sit though, because I need to scroll and...
Yeah, do you want to come and join me, Alana No Friends? Thank you.
Yeah.
We've got a
Alana's new friend.
separation.
Yes, thank you, Karen.
Thank you. So this paper generally just steps you through the key projects that we're working on in the policy and planning team. So as you can see there, the first project there is outstanding water bodies. This is a plan change which was to our regional policy statement, and it just sets out where we are in the process. So what we like to do is just highlight any changes in a different colour text there. So the purple text there is an update since we last brought this paper to you. So we're currently in a mediation phase for this plan change. We had our first mediation meeting last year in October, and we have further meetings scheduled for next week, and that's just a meeting of without prejudice of parties, and we're trying to essentially resolve the issues that are being appealed. And if we can get to that position at the end of mediation, however long that might be, then that's, you know, obviously our key aim. But there is still obviously the opportunity to take this to the Environment Court if there is an agreement. Shall I just pause and let anyone ask questions?
Questions?
Keep going.
Box on.
Box on, beautiful. So the Mohaka catchment policy development, which is the second item there. For those of you who aren't familiar with this, we have been working with primarily Ngāti Pāhauera, who have essentially taken the lead in the plan development here, and we have resourced a team of consultants who are helping assist develop this chapter for Kotahi, which is going to be our regional resource management plan. So we've been slightly held up in terms of that Māori work stream, just given COVID, we've not been able to arrange or they have not been able to arrange the hui, but they did hold an online hui at the end of January, and I hope to be able to report back to you on that in due course. Plan Change 9, which is referred to as TANK for the Tūtaikuri, Ahuriri, Ngaruroro and Karamu catchments. We held hearings last year, and you'll note that there's no update there because we are still waiting a decision on that plan change. There are no further updates there. We had previously reported on the implementation of the National Policy Statement for Urban Development. Nothing new to report there. The Water Conservation Order for Ngaruroro and Clive Rivers, again, nothing to update. We are still waiting a decision from the panel there. Just an apology from me, where it says statutory acknowledgements of treaty settlements, I failed to provide an update, and my sincere apologies. The Ahuriri Hapu Claims Settlement Act was passed into law December of last year, and I will rectify that for the next update just to acknowledge that so it's in written form.
Thank you. Question?
Thank you.
On the Water Conservation Order,
yes.
I know that you can't predict what the courts are going to do, but do we have any indication of when they're likely to come down from the mountain and present to us tablets of stones that we can read?
No, unfortunately not. It's been radio silence for us as well on this, and we had a meeting with the legal team for Forest and Bird the other day on something completely different, and they were also wondering what's going on. So, all parties are just waiting.
There's no deadline that they have to meet, as in with Plan Change 9?
No.
Okay. Law unto themselves.
We like to think it could be, a 6-month period from the time of closing the hearing, but
when did the hearings close? Can you remind me? Was it this century, last century?
June last year.
They were quite severely disrupted by COVID, and
yes.
so they resumed, and I think, it might have been August actually, they resumed.
No, it was slotted in between the tank hearings, so just trying to think. So June or July, sorry, I can't remember.
July last year.
July maybe.
14th of June,
Is it June? It's probably in the paper.
So COVID stops the brain thinking,
June.
does it?
Beg your pardon?
I said COVID stops the brain thinking, does it?
No,
the hearings were disrupted because
the hearings were disrupted, because we had people who were located in Auckland who couldn't then come down to Napier.
Localised effect.
But no, the hearing resumed on the 14th of June, and we still await the decision on that.
But the point it made is that the last hearing was in July last year. June last year. So that's 8 months ago.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions people have got? I'll stop myself. Okay, would someone like to move the paper be received?
I would.
Oh, Alana, thank you. And Sheriff, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, February 2022 Statutory Advocacy Update. Is this you again?
It is. So again, ordinarily we do just step through this as a taken as read paper. We highlight the updated text in red this time. And as you can see, we've had a consultation which is currently open on the National Environmental Standards for human drinking water sources. And the key thing to probably note there is that there are changes in there which include how regional councils consider source waters during resource consent applications and in regional planning. We are reviewing this at the moment, and there are other reviews being undertaken at a national level in terms of the regional councils collective. So we will be posting those as we always do on our submissions database, and we'll be providing you with the links to those.
Okay.
The draft National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity, we had to update this because we were expecting the exposure draft to be released last year, end of last year, and that's now been pushed out to sometime first half of this year. And I think those are the, Central Hawke's Bay District Plan. We do have some hearing dates coming up fairly soon. We will be attending those hearings, and we'll be able to provide you with an update beyond that. But our submission, if you're interested in looking at what we commented on, there's the link there in your paper. Scrolling down, so the Marine and Coastal Area Takatai Moana Act, there was a decision released at the end of last year, and this is the conflict that Councillor Williams was referring to. There have been appeals lodged against this from, as far as I'm aware, Pahuera, I think it's actually all parties. Now that I think of it, yes, all parties. And with regards to the Clarkson case there, we don't have any additional information with regards to that, but they are, as I understand it, gathering information.
So just to clarify this for new councillors, new people here, the council itself makes submissions to Parliament on council plans and so on. So so this is a review of those submissions and those issues in which we engage as a council.
Yes. So in effect, we take part in these processes.
Yes.
So when we receive consultation documents or documents for feedback, whether it's a district plan or a consent, notified consent, we review those, determine whether there's a need for us to make comment or feedback, object or support, and then we will bring those to you through this paper, just to acknowledge that we are across it, and that we're going to be making a submission. And when we make submissions, we provide you with those links.
Okay. Any questions of Kerry? Craig?
Thanks, Kerry. Just looking at the submission to the Central Hawke's Bay on their district plan.
Yes.
I imagine, I'm just going through it, I can't find anything yet, but I imagine that's consistent with our priorities as a council, of climate change and water security. Could you just comment a little bit? There's a lot of commentary around the floodplain issues there. Is that a major issue? There's just quite a large submission in and around that part of their
I
proposed
apologise,
flood
it's been a
hazard
while
areas?
since I've reviewed this. That was back in August last year. I'd need to just...
It does read like you're just trying to coordinate what they are planning to do and with our asset management team and their ambitions, particularly the Advocacy, etc. I guess that's what that's all about.
Through you, Chair, ultimately when a submission is drafted, it's a whole of organisation submission coordinated by policy. So I suspect that that portion of the submission has largely been developed by asset management. I'm happy to get further information for you about that point if you like.
Oh no, that's fine. It's just it's actually great that it's highlighted in there, and hopefully a good CHP district plan comes of it. And it's really good that we have that input, and hopefully it's coordinated with the other councils as well.
But yes, Katrina's absolutely right. That is essentially our role is coordinating those comments from the other arms of the organisation to make sure that we're not missing anything that's important to our functions and our role.
Thank you.
Okay, to the wall. Has anybody got any questions, points of clarification? Can't see any hands up. Any other questions around the table? That been the case. Just wondered, Teresa, if you'd like to move the paper be received. Okay. Kerry, would you like to second it? Thank you. I'll put the question. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. Right. We then come to verbal central government reforms update. You're going to lead us on this, Gavin?
I will, yes. In James's absence.
This could be a very, very long submission.
Sorry. I'll leave this one now. You can sit there.
It's not, comments not to be taken as a reflection on your ability to be brief, Gavin. It's a reflection of the amount of work going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Moana all.
Is that shared at all?
I'm Gavin Ide, and because this rendogram is pretty difficult to read, I am about to send members an email with a link to where this is online. So that should be hitting your inboxes shortly. But for other online viewers and whatnot, that's why I placed it on the screen here. To help somewhat.
Looks like you're an Otago supporter.
What entity is that?
What's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just getting colours out here. What's wrong with black and white?
This diagram has been prepared or assembled by the Department of Internal Affairs, DIA, and has been published online courtesy of Local Government New Zealand, so hence we've got our hands on it. It's an attempt to illustrate or capture a whole swag of central government reforms and their work streams that are impacting on local government councils. I'd be very curious, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, to see what those reforms look like, or a similar diagram looks like in terms of how it may impact on tanga whenua and mana whenua. But that would perhaps come out of some other government department rather than DIA. Nonetheless, I'll just sort of zoom in a little bit, so it might be a bit more legible on the screen. Certainly there's work streams on central government reforms around a review of local government. A panel has been formed and that work is underway. There are also 3 waters, which is hitting headlines up and down the country. I won't go into any detail on any of these, this is just to paint a picture that there are a heck of a lot of things on from central government that are impacting on our business and businesses of others. I will take a bit of a deeper dive into the RM reform stuff shortly, but that's there. Climate change is on the radar too. Emergency management is on the government's to-do list. Waste, health, disability, and various other things. Some of these things do take a bit of a detour around regional councils. They impact more on the territorial city district councils in particular. But for us, there are still a heap of a lot of central government reform work streams that will impact on what we do, when we do it, how we do it, who we do it with, kind of stuff. What this diagram does not necessarily pick up is a whole bunch of other national direction coming at us in our resource management workspace. So we've got NPS, National Policy Statement on highly productive land, biodiversity, some greenhouse gas stuff from industrial heat. NES, National Environmental Standards, for several things. We saw snippets of these draft proposals last year, but the actual form that they will take is likely to emerge sometime in 2022. And there's more. What I want to just jump back to is the resource management reform thing. So I've come and presented to this committee in the past that the government's reform package on resource management will feature 3 new pieces of legislation to replace the RMA. In terms of engaging with local government, ministers, ministry officials have set up various groups and advisory forums. Our Chief Executive, James Palmer, is on one of them, the Local Government Steering Group. I'm on another national advisory group supporting James and his colleagues. I want to read it, just stress the point that both James and I are very mindful of this committee's role in resource management. It's quite unique for Hawke's Bay, and he and I are taking those opportunities to kind of remind ministers and ministry officials that the RPC legislation needs to be accommodated within the resource management reform system. Whatever that looks like, that's for the officials and ministers to figure out. It's not a piece of legislation that should be tossed aside and forgotten about. The indications are from government that their resource management reform work programs are happening at pace, but there are so many moving parts in there. We are now likely to see the bills for the Natural and Built Environments Act and the Strategic Planning Act popping out in around Q3 of this year, calendar year, whereas earlier indications had it somewhat earlier this year. They are still intending on releasing the Climate Change Adaptation Bill before the end of the parliamentary term, which is next year, 2023. I wish them well in that endeavour. There's a heck of a lot of work in that. With the bills coming out in the Q3 of this year, there will be the public submission process, go through select committee opportunities, so we'll be all over that and seizing those opportunities. As Hawke's Bay Regional Council and joining up with our regional sector colleagues and local government New Zealand type colleagues as well, and forming a solid response to those bills in due course.
Okay, any questions people have got of Gavin? Craig?
How beside yourself and James, you're juggling yet another ball in the air with all this, how many other staff of the council are involved directly in working with Wellington to try and get these reforms through?
Staff of this council?
Yes.
I would say very few. I think it's only James and I that have signed non-disclosure agreements to enter into these quite...
Sorry, through you, Chair, just not to jump in over top, there are special interest groups for not only Petty's team, resource management group managers that are being consulted, almost got that word wrong, consulted through the process. So So in all of our areas of expertise and the special interest groups that we sit on, we are having exposure drafts being discussed with us and an opportunity to input into that. There's a policy special interest group, there's consent special interest group. So in all of those facets, biodiversity, all of those facets, those special interest groups have an opportunity to have conversations with ministry officials about this.
Yes. So Chair, so it's just as well as our, the day jobs we all have at this council, we're obviously trying to contribute to better regulation and RMA, whatever, later. So roughly how many people are involved from this council in those various groups? Is it like the entire leadership team a day a week or something, or?
Not the entire leadership group a day a week, but there are particularly James, myself, Ian, Petty, all contributing over time, and most of our third tier managers are on some sort of special interest group, and they meet quarterly or 6 weekly.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I might just have a larger discussion about this in one of our other forums.
I think, thank you for the question. You broached in a way an issue that I thought that we should be addressing at one stage in the future as a council. Or as a region, we need a specialised policy shop. We're dealing with so much public policy that's being dealt with in bits and pieces, but we don't deal with it as a subject. To me, public policy is a subject such as we need river engineering, and we need, managers to run FEMPs and things. But public policy we're engaged in, but we do it on an ad hoc, piece basis, and it's a challenge. Actually, we need to front up to it at some stage.
Probably a lot of duplication across our region, I'd say.
Exactly. It's another argument for amalgamation. Did I say that? No, I didn't. Anybody else got a question?
Yeah, just on that topic, are we leading in this particular area from regional councils around the country, or are all regional councils courted by DIA? And so forth?
It's not just DIA, it's Ministry for the Environment, it's...
That's why I said so forth, yeah.
Across the state sector. Yes, all regional councils are participating in this. But it's fair to say that James's particular connection, because he has experience of how Wellington works internally and experience of how our local government works, has a perspective that not every regional council or chief executive has. So it's been quite an issue for him. The previous chair and I have both said to him he needs to figure out how he manages his workload himself. Both of us have said to him that we think it's good that he participates in these things because we want them to have the best advice possible, but not at the expense of the council, and more particularly not at the expense of him personally. So it's been a bit of a juggle, and he has to manage that himself. But it is a pressure, and Craig has put it aptly that you not only have the day job, but you've got this other job. It's a problem. Any other questions? Will?
Chair, I'm not sure who'd asked, but maybe yourself. That chart plus that list we saw, the amount of reforms and reviews going on, is that quite normal? Is this, the amount that's being taken on here, is this?
This is not normal.
So follow up then the likelihood of trying to achieve all this in a timely manner and with effective results.
I would say to you, in my limited personal experience of this matters, I think you would struggle to see a reform agenda as ambitious as this between now and 1985. This is an explosion of reform through the 80s, late 80s, and there's another sort of series of reforms of this area too. It's sort of comparable. It's in some ways, the late 80s was more reforming. For example, Michael Bassett just went through and abolished about 280 local councils and boards and so on in one sweep. Just went through the place like a bulldozer. they're not doing that here. Yeah, a pile of other reforms as well, but this is quite substantial. There's a lot on.
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
Just a couple of, I want to pick up on, it's not a question, but a point that Gavin shared in a minute, but I think, Rick's point, totally unprecedented. I've been practicing in the area for a quarter of a century and I've seen nothing like it. I haven't been here for half a century, like some people might have, but it's certainly, I think it's, the government's grabbed a tiger by the tail here and it's bitten off more than it can chew. With three waters and future local government and whole resource management system and what have you. So the most sensible piece of advice we had from James some time ago that we got from the government was we just need to carry on because all or any of this could land or not in some shape or other that's difficult to predict. And I do wonder if, rather than the Hawke's Bay Regional Council taking on that yoke, local government NZ, our conduit to a local government voice on a lot of this. But the point I just wanted to make sure everyone quite understood was the issue for this committee specifically, if the NBA is passed as we envisage it to be, there would be a combined plan structure for this region and a joint committee would be formed with, say, 2 or 3 mana whenua representatives for the entire region, 2 or 3 councillors for the entire region, someone from the Ministry of Conservation, and maybe MB or something like that. And the equivalent of TANK or Kotahi would be notified and heard by an independent hearings panel, that committee might have some appointment role, but wouldn't have any part in the hearings, and would then either adopt what this independent hearings panel said, with an incentive that there would then be no Environment Court appeals on the merits, or if it wished to decide something different, open it up to Environment Court appeals on the merits. The point being that the very close and complete control that this committee has on the form of planning instruments would simply not fit with that model. We've got 18 members here. We'd be lucky to have a total of 3 or 4 on a panel, on a joint committee that doesn't actually conduct the hearing. So it is actually a really, really important point that Gavin and James are sharing with government. Don't forget about us, because and we probably not. Well, we are fairly unique, so it'll be interesting to see how that lands. The thing I've been thinking about is kotahi in all of this context, because we have to, in the midst of all of this, do freshwater planning by the end of 2024. And yet, and we're taking on the ambition of a wholesale land change, which I think is the right thing to do. And yet the entire legislative landscape around all of that is changing. So it's incredibly fraught and full of flux. So I just leave you with a thought. We can just carry on with what we can control in front of us in the way we've been discussing. So thanks for that indulgence. Cheers.
Oh, happy for the indulgence. Anybody else want to be indulged?
Are you looking at me?
Anybody else want to be indulged?
No hands.
Any hands on the wall? But the points you make, Martin, are absolutely right. The reform, there's no doubt about this, the reform is often necessary. We don't always make the right decisions, the perfect decisions. We make them, and it's time to refresh. But on occasions, I think you can have just a little more refresh than is necessary or desirable. So we are where we are. We just have to paddle as fast as we can. Okay. All right. Any other comments people like to make? James, welcome back.
Morena koutou. And apologies for not being here, as most committee members will know that it is my practice to attend all these meetings, although this morning there was a meeting of the Regional Council CEOs And I was on the Zoom for that, but I also had Facebook running on the other side. And while I couldn't listen to it, I could see the text, which doesn't always translate all that well, but I could see my name coming up a few times. So I thought I would whip down and be available to answer any questions, particularly if there are any concerns. I do understand that the nature of the conversation you've just been having is about our input into the national reforms on the resource management system, and possibly some concerns about the resourcing impacts on us as an organisation. So to preempt the question, I guess, what I would note are our extraordinary interests as an institution in these reforms, given our specific circumstances we have, particularly for this committee and the statutory basis on which it is premised, and the fact that the government is trying to move a whole bunch of parts of the machinery of government around the resource management system, and the effectiveness of this committee in being able to do its work will be fundamentally impacted by that. So on behalf of this council and this committee, I am representing, as Gavin is, our interests, and we are uniquely placed, and I think I would note that central government does look to this council for leadership, partly because we've been on a progressive agenda as a council. I think we're the first council to have a second generation regional resource management plan. The Tuki plan change was one of the first plan changes to set water quality limits in the country. The tank plan change has been cutting edge in terms of surface groundwater issues, the way in which we used a community collaborative process, and the fact that it was ultimately notified by the Hawke's Bay Regional Planning Committee, which is obviously a partnership construct with Mana Whenua. So when they look at that, and they also look at what we have by way of this unique composition of this committee, they see a regional council that's very much at the leading edge of resource management practice, but also with treaty partnership at the heart of the way we work. So they are seeking from us a fair bit of guidance about our experience and how that might be able to be replicated nationally. As I think Martin was explaining as I came through the door, that doesn't necessarily accord with the Randerson panel's recommendations, which were a much more simplified model. And what I would perhaps say in closing, the challenge for us as a council, for central government in these reforms, are the ones that we've been talking about offline in the workshops in recent months, and that is that the country is facing desperate, pressing issues with respect to climate change, freshwater, biodiversity collapse, and we have been far too slow as a country to deal with those issues for nearly 30 years, if not 180 years. So there is a need to make decisions and make decisions at pace, at also precisely the same time that we're trying to give effect to treaty partnership, which of course in a Te Ao Māori context has a mana whakahaere basis to it, which is that local decision making, local partnership, right down to hapu and marae level is pretty fundamental. And yet also there are many other stakeholders in the community that want to participate in these incredibly important issues, which means an awful lot of engagement. It means decision making involving an awful lot of people on some very complex issues, but at the same time we need to make decisions. We need to make them fast, and the system needs to move fast. So that is a bit of a collision of forces, if you like, and certainly the overwhelming sentiment across the Parliament at the moment is that the resource management system is too costly, too slow, too inefficient, and so the government's trying to find ways to make it faster, more efficient, but yet more inclusive and more founded on a partnership from Te Tiriti. So, you know, you put all that together and the government's got a real headache, and which is why it's banged a number of us practitioners together. On Monday I was on a call with the Secretary for the Environment and advisors to iwi leaders who are feeding into this at the national level and trying to reconcile some of these tensions. And we don't necessarily have all the answers, but I think this committee has the opportunity to very much show the way, and that's a bit of a weirdo to kind of throw down in some respects to this committee with its work that lies ahead with Kotahi. We have to demonstrate to the community and to the nation that we can work together very effectively, but we can work together at pace. Kia ora tātou.
Bill James, just to assuage any concerns you might have, all the comments about you were thoughtful, appreciative and kind. Okay, any comments or questions people would have on that? Okay, well, just to reiterate the obvious, there's an enormous amount of work in front of us. There's some enormous challenges, and we aren't going to be able to avoid them by ignoring them. So you're going to have some pretty big decisions to make. So would someone like to move that we receive the report? Would you like to move that, Laura? Certainly. I'd like to get you on the box. And anyway, would you like to second it?
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right.
Well done.
All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you, Gavin. We now come on to discussion of minor items, but there were none, and we're due to close at 12 o'clock, which is ahead of schedule. So, would you like to lead us through the closure, Pili? Thank you. It was Api in falsetto.
Bit of an uppy and stiletto.
So we've been becoming very familiar with Kia Tau, Kia Tātou Katoa, and it's a little plug for our Keeping app for those who haven't yet to actually download it. So I've given you probably about 20 seconds to find it on your app. Kia Tau, Kia Tātou Katoa. Ready?
Aye.
Kia Tau, Kia
Tātou katoa, te atuai o te tātai o hikukaiti, me te araha o te atua, me te whiwhi te wairo tapu, ake, ake, harmony.
Cheers.
Sure, thank you. Well, wish you all the best for the rest of the day, people, and thank you for your attendance, our new councillors and new representatives here. We'll see you next meeting, and I can assure you you'll have a heavier agenda and a more interesting one next time. Thanks. Right.
Awesome.